Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner.
And welcome back into the Prospect Corner here at the Hockey Writers, and not a World Juniors edition. This is what we would have been doing if the World Juniors were still going on. Everyone's probably heard it's been canceled, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little later. But we're going to start with, the World Juniors, and of course, I'm also joined by my prospect experts here at the Hockey Writers, Peter Baracchini and Greg Boysen. How you guys doing? World Juniors canceled, but how you guys doing regardless in the first day of 2022?
Doing great. I just want to wish you both a happy New Year, and to everyone else out there who's listening. Hope this year is going to be better, and let's get started.
For sure. Yep. I echo that. Happy New Year, everybody. And it stinks we're not watching juniors, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, stuff happens. Like I say, World Juniors is, but we still got some games, and we'll start there. We're going to talk about. This is going to be our first bit of a draft episode because Peter put out his rankings just before the World Juniors. So we're going to talk a bit about that. But first, let's talk about the World Juniors draft eligibles of what we saw. Anyway, we didn't see a lot, and but there was enough to kind of see a few players. Starting with man of the hour here is Brad Lambert. He was the talk before the World Juniors about can he do enough to maybe increase his stock again, because he was supposed to be in that top 5 at least. It could have been a top second overall pick, but he kind of dropped off because of his play in Finland. But Peter will go to you on this. Has he re-entered that top 5 conversation? Because he did put up a goal and 5 points in 2 games there. I think he kind of burst back onto the scene. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Given the fact that he was supposed to be a potential number 2 overall, try and push Shane Wright for first, didn't have the great start, only about 6 points already in the league of this season. There was concerns about his consistency and his production, but, despite all that, he still had great qualities that made him a top 10 pick. He has great speed, great hands, great sense of awareness of what's going on in the ice. So he had that going for him. It's just the points weren't going his way. And coming into this tournament, he needed to have a significant impact. And given the fact that there were only about, 2 or 3 games played, especially for Finland, he had 5 points in 2 games. That's basically the start that he wanted. He was leading the tournament at one point. He looked more confident, I would say. And people may say that, he's already playing in the Liga. He's 18 years old playing amongst men. It's a bit of a difficult transition for him, or he was one of them that didn't quite translate right away. But now that he's still 18 years old, dominating early on of what was, 3 games of the 19-year-old or 20-year-old tournament, this is what they wanted. This is what we wanted to see. We wanted to see that consistency. And for him to do that on a third line with Samuel Helenius and Ville Koivunen, they weren't technically the go-to line for the offense, but here they were, and they're basically in the top 3, 4, 5, 6 in scoring. They ranked literally 5, 6, 7, with Lambert 5 points, Helenius 4, and Koivunen 4. So that line was doing some damage, creating chemistry, and Brad Lambert was a catalyst for them.
Yeah, and it's good. He probably came into this tournament saying, well, I got to show what I can do, because this is a big tournament, and even though it was only 2 games, he did enough. I think I agree with you, Peter, about that, because he is a skilled player. And the one thing about him is, and we saw it in previous World Juniors and the under 18s, he wasn't overly noticeable, but in that last World Juniors, he was really good, and he's kind of shown that again. We'll see how he does in Finland again when he comes back. Maybe he got some confidence from the World Juniors, and he can, build on that. But I still think he's legitimate top 5 pick. I mean, but I mean, there's so many other good players, and we'll talk about them later on. Let's talk about like I mentioned, Shane Wright. Greg, we'll go to you on this. He's gotten some heat about his performance at the World Juniors, even though it was only 2 games, about that should he be a first overall pick. Was that a justified thing, or is it just a bunch of nonsense?
It's nonsense. It's so silly. And we've been hearing this already this year. When he didn't have 10 goals and 20 points in his first 5 games in the OHL, people were already saying, oh, he's not. Listen, if every single NHL scout who's been doing this for decades says this kid's the best kid in the draft, I don't care what Maple Leaf fan 2020 says on Twitter, because he didn't get a point in an 11-2 route. Stop. It's so stupid. This kid is the best player heading into the draft. You know what? Sometimes you don't judge a player just by how many points he gets in a game. You got to see who he's playing with, the situations he's being put in. Sure, you would think Team Canada scores 11 goals in a game. You would think he would have 3 or 4 points, but he didn't. But you know why? Because there's just one puck on the ice, and you have 18 really talented players. Not everybody's going to score in that situation. Look at the line mates he was playing with. Look at the team. I mean, come on. Like, it's silly. If it was the other way around and Shane Wright was on a team like a Switzerland or an Austria and he wasn't performing when he's the guy, then maybe you say, hey, what's going on here? But he doesn't have to be the guy on that Team Canada roster. He's like the 5th or 6th guy on that roster. So just people need to pump the brakes. Anytime something is super popular, be it, a band, a movie, a player, it brings out people that just need to take a crap on it just because, hey, I'm not going along with what everybody else does. So this Shane Wright kid stinks, and they want to get the retweets, and they want to, go from 8 followers to 20 followers. So it's just nonsense. When all the main scouts and all the main, hockey pundits that do this for a living, that watch junior hockey and young players for a living and have done it for years and years and years, all agree that this is the number 1 pick in the draft, I'm going to probably pay a little more attention to the noise coming from that direction than, some guy on his phone at work, because he's mad for whatever reason. So it's nonsense. Shane Wright is the number 1 pick. He's going to be the number 1 pick. And that's, and whoever gets him is going to have a heck of a hockey player.
Yeah, agreed. And Peter, you want to weigh in on that? I saw a few tweets from you after.
Yeah, I immediately looked to the same complaints that people had about Quinton Byfield after 2019, and then the same thing in 2020, where he had a slow start to that tournament, but then the production picked up. I mean, Quinton Byfield is going to be a number 1 center. Like, let's call a spade a spade. That's going to be a fact. Shane Wright is going to be a really great centerman in the NHL. Let's just leave it at that. And a lot of the comments saying that oh, they saw Shane Wright and he looks disinterested at times, and I'm like, I saw him quite a bit in the GTHL. He did not look disinterested at all, and especially for someone who's getting a lot of hype and a lot of, obviously it's going to weigh on him, but he dealt with it well. He was a dominant on the Don Mills Flyers team. He didn't look disinterested in his rookie season, where he put up great points, surpassed McDavid's rookie point total, and was pushing John Tavares's rookie point total as a exceptional status player. And he goes in, dominates the U18s as, a double underager along with Connor Bedard. So the disinterested factor does not make any sense to me, because you excel at the AAA level, you excel at your first year in junior. That where's the fact that he doesn't seem disinterested anymore? It doesn't quite play into that realm for me. Maybe teams are playing him defensively a little bit better, and he's got to push, get it to the next level. Fine, I can see that. But at the same time, with his work ethic, with his vision and his awareness and his ability to be a complete two-way centerman, I mean, you don't want this player to fall to like the 15-20s. Like, that's just ridiculous. If you have a Patrice Bergeron like centerman, I'd take that right away at number 1, even if it's not going to be a high-end centerman like an Austin Matthews or Connor McDavid. You still want that two-way player, because look at Patrice Bergeron and how well he's played in his career. No one's complaining about that, even though he was a second-round pick. So if he's a two-way center at number one, so be it. I'm taking that all the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with both of you. I mean, the thing is when I first heard that, I saw those tweets and saw that stuff, and like, come on, you look at guys that we talked about generational players. He's not a generational player. I mean, he's going to be a really good NHLer, but the fact that he didn't put up, like Greg said, put up a ton of points in a 11-2 road, like whatever. He's still going to be a great player in the NHL, and he's still a top end prospect. I think, he's still gonna be first overall. So we gotta just that's just noise. We'll just leave it alone.
Yeah, but, I think another issue that people that want to jump on this when Shane Wright isn't that great bandwagon is because they see like Bedard and Mitchkov, who are not even eligible until next year, go out and have amazing games. Well, he's not those guys, and you don't get those guys every year. And the fact we're getting two of them in 2023 is insane. So like, not every draft is going to have a Connor McDavid in it. And it still doesn't mean he's not the best player of this upcoming draft class. Yeah,
100%. So, I mean, let's leave it there. Let's talk about a few other draft eligibles. We'll go around the table here. Is there any other draft eligibles that kind of caught your eye throughout this tournament, or whatever, how many games we did get? I mean, there was a few still. Was there anyone that kind of caught your eye other than, we just talked about Brad Lambert, but anyone else? Peter, we'll go to you on this first.
Yeah, I'm going to say Simon Nemec from Slovakia. This was a really, really young team, a lot of draft eligible players this year and even next year for 2023. And for him to come in and be a leader on this team, granted that they lost to Team USA, got a forfeit win against Team Russia. They looked really, really great as a team, like very complete. Obviously no results. And even against that loss to Sweden, they were peppering Jesper Wallstedt with shots and just nothing went their way. So the fact that he was leading the charge on the back end with his speed, his ability to join into the rush, his puck handling, his confidence, his poise, there is if there was any questions to say that he wasn't the best defenseman in this draft, he really is, just because of that alone. And the fact that he, even at the U18s in the Hlinka Gretzky Cup, he was just absolutely dominant from the blue line, and just absolutely can't say anything bad about his game. He's very complete, very aware, and he wants to take that next step forward. And the fact that he was taking this team on his shoulders was a great sign for that.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. Greg, you have anyone that you saw?
I'm going to stick with Slovakia, and maybe it's only because they were one of the only teams that had two games, and I saw a lot of them. But Juraj Slafkovsky, man, I mean, he literally stands out, and then his play stands out. I mean, he's a huge kid. I swear he was never on the bench in either of those games. It seemed that any time that Slovakia had the puck in the offensive zone, it was on his stick. He was out there for 58 minutes a game. It appeared like he was super noticeable. He was a difference maker. And if it wasn't for the fact that he had to go up against two great goaltending performances in Drew Commesso and Jesper Wallstedt, he would have had, multiple points in both games. A little bit of hard luck facing two hot goaltenders to start the tournament. But man, that was the first time I really got to see him outside of highlight packages, get to see him in game situations, and he was super impressive. That kid is going to be a really good NHL player, and nothing seemed to phase him on the ice. He was out there for all situations, and every time he was out there, you knew he was. I know it's not just because he was 6'4" and well over 200 pounds already. He's huge, but his presence was known out there. You knew when he was on the ice, and he played huge minutes, important minutes, and was a difference maker. So he's going to be a name you're going to hear really early in that first round. And if your favorite team is lucky enough to get him, I think you're going to have a special player.
Yeah, that's Slovakia. I think Slovakia would have done really well throughout the tournament, and unfortunately we didn't see anymore after that. But I agree with those two, and I'm gonna go with the American. I mean, they only played one game, right? But in that game I saw Logan Cooley, who was I've talked about him in the past on other shows, and even just in the one game I saw, he was he looked really good. So too bad we didn't see more of him, but I'm sure we'll talk a lot about him as the draft goes on, because I mean, he's a great prospect, great two-way player, great work ethic. He's got a really well-rounded game, and he could potentially be in that top 5 discussion as well, which we'll again talk about later. Just to finish off this discussion, the World Juniors was postponed, not canceled. Can't say that word. It was not canceled. It was postponed. And the same thing with the under 18 women's. They should have said postponed, not canceled, because I think that's going to go on eventually as well. But just go quick. I'm sure we'll know that this is it's probably something we predicted, but was this the right decision? Peter, we talked about it when the news broke. Are you still of that mindset that it's the right decision? And following up on that, do you think it's going to be played in the summer it could be amongst the draft and the Stanley Cup playoffs? Is that the right decision for that if they do decide to do that?
Yeah. Obviously, when we talked, I'm going to stand by my comments to say it was the right decision. There were more cases, positivity or positive tests afterwards. We found out from Bob McKenzie and other insiders as well. Even though the cases were small, like maybe 2, 3, 4, it could have gotten significantly worse because of this highly transmissible variant. Even though the severity, again, information is still coming out about it, but it may not be that severe. Okay, good, considering the fact that you would assume that most of these players are vaccinated and the severity may not be as bad. But at the same time, if it transmits easily and you get it, you don't want to pass it on to anybody else because you don't know what other situation is going to happen to them. So the fact that they were able to postpone it for the time being, it was definitely the right move. And just hearing about the comments about how the situation was unfolding in Red Deer and the hotel situation is just absolutely disgraceful from the double IHF part. And let's hope that they learn the lessons and maybe make that, conscientious effort to do a little bit better instead of just doing the bare minimum. Because when this virus came out, it was spreading fast and they didn't adapt to it. So let's hope that they learned the lesson.
Yeah, I agree. And Greg, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It was the right call, and it's such a tough call to make. And you get arguments on both sides. Of course, the guys, on TSN are saying, "Oh, this is stupid." Well, we know why you've got a vested interest in this, but Peter touched on it. This was an organizational failure. This is where it was. The IIHF dropped the ball, then kicked the ball into traffic, and the ball got ran over and set on fire. That's how bad. I mean, I know they've got a new leadership group there now, but man, their first few months has been one dumpster fire after another. They are stepping in every pile along the way. They lost the NHL players for the Olympics. They screwed up with the whole women's 18 world champ, how they handled that. Now this, I mean, yes, canceling, postponing was the right call. But they could have done better. And I know the new variant came out of nowhere and it's spreading fast and you can't really control that, but they should have thought well along. This has been my frustration with the hockey world all across at every level with all of this going on, that there's never seems to be any kind of contingency plan. It was like, well, we're just going to go in and everything is going to be normal. And nobody ever thought, well, just in case it's not normal, what do we do? And then they get hit with something and then they don't know what to do. And they make it up as they go along and everybody suffers. There's been no contingency plan. It just seems like everybody thought this was all over. Nothing was going to happen. COVID was gone. And now the entire hockey world is in upheaval because of no plan B. There should have been a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, a plan E. Like none of that happened. And it's disappointing. It's disappointing for the kids, obviously, that playing. Hopefully they get it. They'll figure out a good way to put it back. Maybe in the summer, early spring. Who knows? It's tough, especially if you're going to want to do it in Edmonton. That's a building that may or may not have to be available in May or June. But the way things have been going, probably not. But it's real tough. But hopefully they figure out a way to get the tournament either started over or continue it where it was at. and let these kids have that moment. I mean, I think by the time, you know, spring, summer rolls around, it's not going to have too much of an effect on the draft. It may help those players that are borderline draft picks maybe get a good ranking, and they need that. I mean, there was a tweet out there from I think it was Ken Campbell, who was like, oh, teams like Austria and Switzerland, like, why are they in this tournament? Well, they're in this tournament because A, they deserve to be there, and B, that's how these kids get properly scouted, and programs as a whole get better. I mean, look at Germany 10 years ago to where they are now. It's because they got to play. Sure, they may get their teeth kicked in for a couple of years, but eventually you're never going to get better if you don't get to play against the best. So hopefully all these kids get that opportunity. You know, for some of these kids in these other countries, this is like the highlight of their career. So hopefully they don't get that taken away completely. Hopefully they get the IIHF gets somebody in there with a voice of reason, and they can figure this out, and we can get this thing back going in the spring or summertime. If for anything else, is to give these kids the reward that they deserve for all the hard work they've put in for years for this moment.
Yeah, I echo both you. I mean, the thing is these lesser countries, that's where these guys showcase their talent. I mean, they don't really nowhere else, and the scouts sometimes don't go out to watch them at their where they're playing, and this is where they get to do it. So hopefully this all works out and they can have the tournament sometime. I say reset the whole tournament. Don't, whatever about the games that have been played, start it over and just treat those as exhibition games that are done. So we'll see what happens.
I think with the games that have been forfeited, I think you could try and replay those games so that way they have the fair advantage to make an impact in the standings. The games that have already been played, I think you can, chalk those up as, official results, but the ones that have had to be postponed or forfeited, I say let them replay, because a 1-0 score just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, no, that for sure.
Yeah, as long as you can put everybody on a level playing field, put them on a level playing field, let them go. Let the tournament be decided on the ice.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, we'll leave all that to World Junior talk and move on to our first rankings talk here. And Peter, you did put out your first one in the preseason. We didn't have a show on that, but we will talk about this pretty big one that you put out just before the World Juniors. Tell us, who was your top 5, and we'll go from there.
Oh, some people may not like it, but I do have Shane Wright as number 1. He's going to be number 1. So let's just, nip that right there. Simon Nemec comes in at number 2, Matthew Savoy 3, Joaquin Kemmel 4, and Logan Cooley at number 5.
I like that Logan Cooley at number 5. Greg, you agree with that top 5, or is there someone off base there?
At the time those came out, I didn't have a problem with, but we'll get to risers and fallers later, so I don't want to get too much into it. But no, those, I mean, that's a solid top 5. Obviously, there's a handful of players that you could easily insert, but who do you take out? That's the tough part. So yeah, that's a solid top 5. It's hard to argue with any of those picks. You may change it a little bit now, but again, spoiler alert, we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
Spoiler alert, it is going to change next time around. So
and again and again.
Absolutely.
As it always does, as we saw last year when we did these. I agree with that top 5. Like I said, I like that Logan Cooley pick at 5. It's higher than before when you're first ranking, but and there was a guy in there, Matthew Savoy, didn't even have a chance to do anything at World Juniors, even though it wasn't even, they didn't play very much, but I think he would have added to that attack. Nemec, I love that number 2. He may be a little high on defense being the second overall pick, but like Greg said, I think that top 5 is a solid top 5, which will probably change. Like I said about Lambert, he may jump in there. We'll see. Round out the top 10 for us, Peter. Who you got?
Yes. So from 6 to 10, or 6 is going to be Danila Yurov, 7 Yuri Slavkovsky, 8 Connor Geeky, 9 Brad Lambert, and 10 Ivan Miroshnichenko. Yeah,
that last bit, we have another Geeky in there. There's already playing for the Seattle Kraken. Slavkovsky, who we mentioned before, Greg mentioned him. Yeah, that rest of that top 10 again. Top 10s will change. I mean, I think a lot in this draft. This top 10s are going to change a lot because there's so much talent in this first round that could move around. So, but yeah, that top 10 looks very good, and whoever has a top 10 pick is going to have the good pick of some elite talent. Greg, you agree with that rest of that top 10?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, again, there's a couple of guys right outside that top 10 that maybe should be there. There's a couple of guys at the bottom of that top 10 that maybe should be a little higher. But again, it's so tough to differentiate some of these guys. It's such a tight pack where you can be third ranked player overall one week, and then you have a bad week and all of a sudden you're 14th ranked because of it. There's a couple of guys. One guy that I was kind of bummed of his tournament was David Jurasek of Czechia, the defenseman that got hurt in that Canada game. I was really looking forward to seeing what he could do. He's a guy that's on the outside of the top 10 that I think hopefully it does now. I didn't see a whole lot of updates. I know Bob McKenzie said it wasn't as serious as it initially looked, even though he wasn't expected to come back for the rest of the tournament. So hopefully he can rebound. Yeah, which is really good, because you don't want to see a kid fall in the draft because of an injury. Yeah. He was a kid that I thought could definitely be in that top 10 discussion. Unfortunately, didn't get the chance to show it, but hopefully this tournament gets back on the way in a couple months. He's healthy, and then he's able to say, hey, Simon Nemec is a really good player, but hey, so am I. Don't sleep on me. So that's one guy I might have thrown into that top 10.
Yeah, it was unfortunate. I was very excited to see him play too, and getting injured really early, and was really unfortunate. And hopefully he can have a chance to kind of bounce back from that, and because I still think he's a ridiculously good prospect for this draft. And so we'll leave it there for now. Let's do a quick pause and just thanks everyone for tuning into the show into 2022 here, and the amount of episodes we've done already. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel. There's a bunch of shows on here that there's a lot of exciting stuff coming in 2022. Spoiler, there's going to be some exciting new stuff happening with the show. So stay tuned for all that. Grind Line, Maple Leafs Lounge, Blackhawks Banter, Chicks and Sticks amongst of those. And so make sure you're checking that out, and check out thehockeywriters.com. I mean, our World Juniors coverage was ridiculously well done, led by Peter and all of our writers there. They did a hell of a job covering the tournament as much as it was, and they will continue when the World Juniors restarts, and they'll be doing their best work as well. So make sure you're checking out the Hockey Writers. There's a bunch of NHL stuff as well. That there are games playing kind of sporadically now. I mean, some teams are still kind of in that pause stuff, but there's still content on the site. So make sure you're checking that out, and check out the Morning Skate newsletter as well. Sign up at morningskate.io. Lots of news that comes through there to your inbox 5 days a week. Lots of great content there as well. So, there, make sure you're checking all that out. Let's move on and keep talking about Peter's rankings here, and talk about some risers and fallers from his first one. Peter, who is your biggest risers from that first preseason edition there?
Yeah, there were quite a few. Obviously, Logan Cooley rose up. I had him at 8. He goes into my top 5. Joaquin Campbell, 13 to the top 5 as well. But I'm going to focus in on Ty Nelson, who I initially had at 28 and rose up to top 20 for me. And mainly because everyone's going to put the knock on him because of his size. But this is a player who has great awareness, a great shot from the point. He plays a bigger game than his size actually shows on the stat sheet. But I'm just really happy with the way that he's played and the way that he's progressed, considering he never played a game last season in the OHL. But this season, he's taken the league by storm, and he's one of the top producing defenders this year. So the fact that he's put his name on and he continues to get better, he's one of my top biggest risers from the first ranking to this one.
Yeah, those are big ones that I kind of saw as well. Logan Cooley was my one that I saw kind of raised up, which was I was very impressed because spoiler alert, he'll be in my top 5 when mine finally drop. But Greg, see any climbers that you saw that you want to kind of point out there?
Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of Logan Cooley too. I think he's man, I just like the way he plays the game. Yeah, a little biased. He's an American kid, but top 5 talent. There's no doubt for that. I mentioned Slavkovsky again is another player I'm a big fan of. Joachim Kemmel is a guy that I think has climbed the rankings. What he's been able to do I know he's top 5 now, but I think from where the season began to where he is now, he's progressed really well. What he's been able to do in Finland. There's a lot of guys that are just they're opening your eyes, and they're proving that these preseason rankings were legit. And that's the fun part about this time of year is when you see names at the beginning of the year, you see them as they go, and for a while they're just names, and then you get to see these kids play, and you can attach the actual physical attributes and talent to these names, and then they really strike with you. And then I love it because then you get an attachment with a kid at a World Junior tournament, and then you follow him along. And then when he gets that first NHL goal or he's an NHL All-Star, you're like, man, I remember him when he was just at the US, program. That's why I love the prospects and covering them and talking about them. And we've got a lot of this draft class kind of, it's a lot of people are saying it's a down draft class, and sure, it may not be loaded with franchise type players, but there are so many talented kids in this draft, especially in that top 10, top first round is loaded with great players. So don't sleep on this draft class. That's all. That's pretty much the message here. There's going to be some great NHL players coming out of this one.
Yeah, I argue that this draft, from what I've seen so far, it's a deep one. Not like I say, there's not crazy amount of generational guys that you're like, oh yeah, these guys are going to be superstars in the NHL, but a lot of solid talent here. And yeah, don't sleep on this draft. I have said in the past, if you're an NHL team and you have a first round pick in this draft or the next one, do not trade it unless you really have to, and you need to push your team over. But if you're a board, an fringe team, keep your first round pick in this draft, and then for sure the next one, because there's just so much that you can get from this first round, at least in this first round. So I agree with that. Of course, when there's climbers, there's guys that drop. Peter, who do you got as some guys that kind of fell off from the first ranks? I mean, this is very early, but who do you have?
I was going to save one name for when we get to one of our questions later on. But I'm going to go with Tristan Luneau from the Gatineau Olympique. I initially had him 12th, and he dropped to 17th. That may not seem like a big jump, but given the fact that he had a really slow start offensively, he still possesses a great two-way ability on the blue line. He has good smarts. He has the ability to block the opposition out, a great active stick, and he transitions well from defense to offense. So I really like that factor about his game. And his offensive game has really come a long way since then. Slow start, but it's coming right away. And I'm very high on him to maybe not necessarily have him in my top 15, but he's still worth a top 20 pick in my view.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I mean, this is all going to really, this is so fluid right now. And guys that are dropped now and rise now will kind of move around. And that's what I love about this time. I mean, draft is just so much stuff changes every day, and it's great to kind of follow along. Greg, who you got as a guy that's kind of dropped off in this rankings?
It's tough to really, when we're talking about first round players, how much of a difference is it really from being 4th to 10th at this? A lot of it's going to come down to what team is drafting at what point and what they need. Where we may have a guy that's ranked 3rd, but he may not go to 11th because of needs and all that other stuff. The one guy, and we're going to kind of touch on this too a little later, but a guy that I think not necessarily fell far from preseason to these rankings, but might take a dip in the next rankings. If I can predict, might be a guy like Danil Yurov, the Russian player. I think, and I'll mention him again in another topic, but I think that's a guy that needs to do a little bit more to really earn that top 10 ranking. But we'll touch on that in a moment.
Yeah. Let's talk about the World Juniors was ultimately canceled, but was there anyone that kind of performed well other than like Lambert to increase their stock for the upcoming draft? Peter, who you have that that did enough? I mean, there wasn't a lot of games, but did they do enough to kind of increase their stock for the next time?
I kind of disagree with Danil Yurov on Greg's. This is the first time we've ever disagreed on this show for the first time. I mean,
new year, baby.
New year, try something new. Granted that he was on the 13th, 14th forward for Russia, whenever he did get onto the ice, he did make an impact. And I think that's where I was hoping to get more ice time from him and him be more of kind of an impact player for them this year. When he was on the ice, I thought he did really well. I believe it was in the game against Switzerland. He had a goal and an assist. If I remember correctly, he had a goal. He had a goal in that game. So the offense is starting to come, but this is a guy who has a lot of great speed, and he's someone that can just fly through the ice and get by everybody in a flash. And I think that's his greatest asset. If he gets more of the opportunities, I think he's going to stick well in that top 10 range. Obviously, small sample. I would have loved to see more and maybe get more of an increased role. And it looked like the line juggling was happening throughout the game, and as the tournament went on, whatever was available. But I think Yurov has established himself as a potential top 10 pick, as someone that can be dangerous because of his skating ability and his passing awareness.
Yeah, Greg, who you have in that's kind of done enough at this World Juniors? I mean, the games that we did see.
I mean, obviously Lambert's the easy pick here. He really impressed. I'm going to kind of go way off the board, and a guy that, I don't think anybody's really ranking or talking about, but this could be a guy that maybe earned himself a late round pick. And that's Florian Bugel, the goalie from Germany. His performance was just outstanding in that overtime win for Germany. And this is a guy that, he's 19. He's playing over in Germany. As we've discussed he's over in the Austrian leagues, not Germany. Kind of an under the radar, not coming from a hotbed of hockey, but man, he got put on the biggest stage that a player at that age can in a tough situation, and was just absolutely phenomenal. It's too bad that he didn't, get more games. We're saying that a lot today, but I think he's a guy that opened some eyes and now might be on, he wasn't on a lot of lists before. You don't hear a lot about those late round goalies per se. They don't get as much of the glory as your top picks, but he's a guy that I think definitely opened some eyes and will get much more consideration heading into the draft than he did before that game.
Yeah, that would be my pick. You kind of took that from me, Greg. He was very impressive in that game, and we'll see where he goes, because goaltenders in general don't usually go really high unless they're like Jesper Wallstedt or guys like that. But he could warrant a later round pick, and he definitely did enough to get on scouts' radar, if anything, right? So let's go the other side. Who needs to do more in the coming months? Not World Juniors, but who just needs to play better and kind of increase their stock because of what right now, they're not as high up right now. Greg, who do you have that needs to do more?
I kind of mentioned, I just, something about Yurov, just, I don't know. I just, maybe it's just because Russia loves to play politics as opposed to hockey when it comes to these international tournaments, and some of these kids get screwed by it. Just ask any of the ones that were playing in North America. Maybe it's just, I know he's got no points in the KHL in 21 games. Yes, I know for a kid like him, it's tough. He probably plays 4 or 5 minutes a night. yes, but I want to see something. I know that's not, I'm the first guy that tells you don't pay attention to the score sheet when you talk about drafting, but 21 games in the KHL, can you give me something? That's a little worrying. I know he's talented. I just don't know if he's a top 10 talent. I don't know if I would invest a top 10 pick in him right now. Another guy that I wanted to see a little bit more of, and again, in a very tough situation, so I'm not picking on him, but it's a guy that's people are thinking is going to go later in that first round. That's Marco Kasper from Austria. They had a real rough go of it. But again, not his fault. It's tough when you're like the one guy that's going to be dependent on your offense, because it's very easy for the other teams to just smother you and make sure you don't get those opportunities. But again, those are the types of situations where the true elite players differentiate themselves. When the entire team makes a game plan to stop you and you still find a way to make a difference, that's when you take that step from being a very good player to an elite player. I really didn't see that. So he's another one of those guys that I'm not knocking, because again, it's a real tough situation. He's done okay playing in the Swedish Hockey League this year. So, but he's another one of those guys I'm not sure I would invest a first round pick in, even later in the round, but the potential is there. And as the second half of the season progresses, he's a guy that I'm going to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Peter, who you have needs to be doing more in the next few months to kind of secure a spot in that first round.
And this ties in with one of my biggest followers as well, is Elias Salomonsson, who was in my top 15 previously, but then dropped to 22. I'm concerned about his consistency and his ability to just elevate his play. I thought that there were at the beginning of the season, there were some aspects that I really liked and I wanted to see more of, but I just haven't been impressed with his play overall. And the fact that he's just into the late or the early part of the 20s, others are starting to see him maybe even fall out of that first round, and that's going to be very concerning for him. So he's definitely one player that really needs to elevate his play, show that consistency on both sides of the puck, because he is a very mobile defender, and it's just that he's just not showing it right now. And I expect this, I would hope that he would increase his play and get more opportunities and try to improve his draft stock, because it's not looking good at this point.
Yeah, like you said, it's really early on here, and these guys have a lot more hockey to play, and hopefully no leagues get shut down because of COVID, and and we can see playoffs for a lot of these times too, because that's where you see a lot of this, a lot of the those intangibles for these players, and we didn't see that last year with a lot of guys. They weren't able to play those playoff games, and that's where you see a lot of this stuff. And I hope that all goes smoothly and all these guys can play those games, because you need to see that from these guys. But yeah, I agree with those. And just to finish off this discussion, it's like I say, it's early. Maybe there's not a lot of these yet, but Peter, you have any late round gems that you have your eye on, guys that could potentially be really good, and you draft them in the third, fourth round?
Yeah, I am going to say, I was going to say Hunter Height, but not Hunter Height. I just spoiled it. I was going to say Callie Odelius, but he's going to be shooting up my draft rankings very shortly, because I love his two-way play and his composure and his confidence. But Hunter Height is, not so spoiler alert, is going to be one of those, late round picks that some may not be high on. They have him as maybe a late second, early third, but I think he's going to do a lot more damage and may have solidified more to be in that mid-second round because of his speed and his awareness and his shot. Obviously, didn't quite get a lot of looks because of the locked out OHL season, but his awareness and his speed is just going to catch some team's eye, and it's going to be like, you know what, we have something promising here. We're going to draft him earlier on than expected.
Yeah, and we'll see a lot more as time goes on here with those late round picks. Greg, you got anyone that you have your eye on that could potentially be that gem?
I think a guy that people should keep an eye on, looking third, possibly second round, is Maddox Fleming, the winger. He's in the USHL right now, right winger. He's kind of been bumped around a little bit, played a bunch of games for the under 18 U.S. development team, and then a little USHL with Team USA, and now with Sioux Falls. He's in 15 total USHL games. He's got 3 goals and 9 points. Not numbers that jump off the sheet, but he's a dynamic, shifty little winger. He's going to play at Notre Dame college hockey next season, so it's definitely a good program to get on, to get noticed in. This was a kid actually a couple of years ago when I was scouting in the North American Hockey League. I got to see a little bit at a U16 showcase when he was playing for the Minnesota Blades, and he stood out even a couple of years ago. Just just a dynamic player that may not be necessarily the best player on the ice, but he's got a lot of skill, and he's got speed, and he's got that hockey IQ that everybody loves to hear about. So I think he's one of those guys that third round gets picked and not going to cause a lot of fanfare, but in a couple years, people, when we're ranking team prospect pools, we're going to say, man, this guy was a third round pick and they're getting a lot of value out of him. So Maddox Fleming is definitely a young American kid I'm keeping my eyes on heading into the draft.
Yeah. Right now for me, I don't have anyone that really sticks out right now, but I will have one next episode for sure when I'm going to be delving more into my rankings and a little later this year. Maybe not late, I don't know. From last year, I think I put my first ones out in January from what I remember, but yeah, so stay tuned for that. And so that's our first bit of draft coverage here. Just finish off the show as we normally do. We skipped it last episode because of the Canada-US preview, which of course died pretty quickly because there weren't as many games, but thanks to whoever watched it, because it was relevant for a time. And it will get relevant again once the World Juniors get going as well. So prospects of the week. Greg, we'll start with you. Who's your prospect of the week?
Shocking, I'm going to go to the AHL for my prospect of the week. It's a kid we talked about a lot last year. 9th overall pick from the 2020 draft, Marco Rossi, Minnesota Wild prospect. He's been tearing it up in the AHL this year for those who haven't been paying attention. The AHL has struggled to keep their games scheduled these past couple of weeks. As same problem with the NHL. The Iowa Wild, where he's been playing all season, had 2 games this week. So far, they're supposed to play again on Sunday, but in his 2 games this week, he had 3 goals and 1 assist, including during their midweek game against Colorado. He had the overtime game-winning goal via a penalty shot to give Iowa 2 points. He's got 7 goals and 22 points in 20 AHL games this year, and I don't think it's going to be too much longer before he makes his NHL debut. Minnesota is a team that lots to be excited about. They got off to a really good start, and they're kind of sort of coming back to earth right now. They don't, they've got a lot of guys who I think have been overachieving so far in the NHL. So now if you can get an influx of a guy like Marco Rossi, they got another forward that I'm really high on who plays well in the AHL when healthy is Matt Boldy. You get those 2 guys injected in their lineup here by the end of the year, and they're going to go from what we used to joke about in Chicago and call them the Minnesota Mild, because they were kind of just bleh, and they're going to become a really exciting team here in the next couple of years, and Rossi's going to lead that charge.
Yeah, big fan of Marco Rossi, and if you guys watch the draft coverage when we were doing that, I love the guy. And he like I said, he came back from a pretty big scare for his health, which is great that he's come back and become the player that we know he is. So that's awesome. Peter, who you have as your prospect of the week?
Despite the short tournament, I'm going to Team Finland, and I'm going to say Ville Koivunen, who had 4 points in 2 games in the games that he played. Obviously, nothing stands out about his game, but he just plays everything so smart. I mean, he thinks at a very quick pace, and it seems like every move that he makes is always the right one. And even when he seems down and out, he manages to score a really ridiculous goal. I mean, he was on the ice and he manages to get one by, and everyone was talking about that goal. And he's just a really great fluid passer, really great awareness to just open up the game. He was one of those top 3 players on that third line for Finland with Lambert and Hellenius, and he was one of the driving forces for them offensively. So he's my pick of the week.
Yeah, Dean's gonna like that pick, Carolina Hurricanes there. So I'm gonna go with seems to be a bit of a theme. I'm going with a Matthew and Matthew Seminoff, Kamloops Blazers forward, and again, maybe it's just the name, but work ethic seems to be a big thing with that name. So and Seminoff definitely has that. He's not super skilled in one area, but he's got a really good game, well-rounded game. Peter, you had him 59th on your latest rankings. That's second round pick. And, he could potentially be, raise up if he, gets his game going a bit more. But again, those guys that have a well-rounded game, they can, exist in the NHL as that third line, borderline second line player. And just because his work ethic and overall skill can potentially be a very solid NHLer in the future. And so I go with Matthew Seminoff as my pick there for prospect of the week. I'm sure we'll talk more about these guys as we go, and the draft profiles, which is a great segue to what we'll talk about here. Is our draft coverage is going to be starting pretty soon. They won't be published right away, but we're going to start working on our draft profiles, and look for that as we go here, because and of course, Peter had his rankings, so we'll be coming out with another one, I'm sure. Andrew Forbes, who is going to be a regular panelist on this show as the draft goes on, I'm sure here, and he just dropped his rankings today. So when you guys watch this tomorrow, it will be yesterday, but definitely check those out, and we'll have a whole episode dedicated to his rankings pretty soon as well. So stay tuned for draft coverage, more shows on the draft, scouting reports, all that fun stuff. And before we end the show, I just wanted to, this is January 1st, first day of 2022. Just want to thank everyone for watching the show, for catching all this content on the website. I want to say we've had 59 million page views over this past year, 2021, 32 million Hockey Writers fans. Thanks so much to everyone that's, watched the shows, taken in the articles on the website, all that stuff, interacting with us on Twitter, on Discord, all that fun stuff for the Morning Skate newsletter. Got tons of stuff that happened in 2021. And thanks for coming to the website every day. Whether it be a new reader or, a common one that's come every day. And thanks so much. Without you guys, we wouldn't be here. So thank you for tuning in, for reading. And 2022 is going to be it's going to be even bigger. We have a lot of stuff planned, which we'll tease in the next few days, but just wanted to say thank you. And from everyone at Hockey Writers, we just thank you so much. So yeah, that's the show. Make sure you're, like I said, I mentioned all this stuff. Make sure you're checking out all that stuff on the Hockey Writers, and we'll see you next week for another. Any closing thoughts from me, Peter, Greg, as before we close here?
No, just again, you just mentioned some really great numbers. Thanks to everyone who's tuned in, visited the site, read all of our stuff. It couldn't ask to be a part of a better group of writers who just has an extensive knowledge of hockey. It really is truly a great experience.
For sure. I'll echo what you guys say. Thanks to everybody who watches, reads. They wouldn't have us do this if there wasn't an audience out there. So you guys make it all possible. Just hope everybody has a safe and healthy new year, and let's try and work together to get everything back to whatever the new normal is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a new normal, and hopefully we get to, somewhat back to what we had before. But so thanks so much, and we'll see you next week for another Prospect Corner.